Sleepy Pines Mall was located in the northeastern United States, a few miles off the highway. It stood at the center of several small towns, boasting only one floor and two main anchor stores, yet its scale was quite large for its rural setting. Built in 1973, it was one of the older establishments, opened before long-term sustainability strategies for malls were common. Once bustling, Sleepy Pines began to decline in the late 90s, losing its cinema and Sears store by 2003. From then on, it became a neglected commercial area, poorly maintained and sometimes dangerous. Nearby competitors successively surpassed it, while the surrounding towns that once nourished it gradually fell into disrepair. The food court closed in 2006, and the last store ceased operations a year later. Sleepy Pines still had its fans, and many adults who had visited as children often returned for nostalgic reasons. But by 2010, it was nothing more than a forgotten ruin with a parking lot overgrown with tall grass. 10 years later, the mall's prolonged demolition reached its final stages. I was assigned to oversee the construction of the new building that would replace it, a large warehouse and distribution center for a well-known retail chain. I frequently visited the site as walls were torn down and the roof dismantled. I myself had been there a few times in my childhood when my family passed through the area, so I knew the place well. By the winter of 2020, all that remained of Sleepy Pines was the back wall of the central area, which once overlooked the fountain. A ceramic tile mosaic covered that wall. Numerous attempts to preserve the mural had delayed demolition, but there was never enough budget to fulfill the wishes of just a few dozen people. Personally, I'm not an art connoisseur, but I always found this mural a bit creepy. It depicted European settlers amidst pine forests, with Native Americans by their side but painted as friends. Their faces were simple and crude, their eyes staring blankly towards what was once the mall's skylight. In contrast, the pine trees seemed to be painted by a different, perhaps more talented artist. The trees were dark and somber, yet very detailed, with layers of shadows, as if harboring some demonic forest creatures. The artist probably painted it for fun, with no malicious intent. Anyway, most shoppers wouldn't stop to study the mural meticulously when sales and hot pretzels awaited them. Now, the mural was also slated for removal, and construction of the new building would begin after winter. The remaining demolition work was paused because the ground was frozen. One day after the New Year holiday, I visited the site to see the mural one last time, now exposed to the elements and surrounded by snow. I also stopped by the site office to wish a happy new year to the manager there, whom I had known from many previous projects. "Still into your oddities, huh?" he asked after a few minutes of holiday small talk. "Found something you might like before the crew left. I don't know anything about electronics, so you should probably see if you can do anything with it." He handed me an old GoPro camera, which I later learned was from 2013. On the surface, this little device was in terrible shape, but initially I didn't think it was that asterisk bad. Indeed, I have a hobby of collecting strange artifacts and old yard sale finds with inexplicable stories in my spare time. It wasn't the camera itself that could compare to my more prized collectibles, but rather the footage inside, if it still existed. If it could explain how the device got so twisted, the story of this item would be even more intriguing. I had a long winter ahead with little work to do, so I thought I could spend a few nights going through this footage. "Oh wow," I replied, looking closely at the camera as if it had melted. "Yeah, we dug it up, didn't know what it was. Didn't know if there was a fire here at first, but it doesn't look like burn marks," he said. He had a point. No signs of smoke, no bubbling in the material, no wear on the metal. It looked as if it had been kneaded into a distorted shape. The LCD screen and lens were still intact, but the body was warped, stretched, and compressed as if hundreds of tiny fingers had worked on it. If the memory card inside was still intact, I wouldn't be able to remove it. I'd have to carefully dismantle the camera around the card. Of course, I had a full toolkit at home, so I knew I could do it. Maybe the card was lost, or the data was corrupted or erased, but at this point, I was curious. "I want to know for sure," I told my friend, promising to grab lunch soon before heading home. I earned a good salary, and after my divorce, I kept the house but hadn't considered moving or finding a better place. It was small and half filled with cardboard boxes or untouched clutter. My home office was the only tidy room, also where my workbench and tools were, which I used to dismantle the once modern, now distorted camera. I took it apart piece by piece, and eventually the micro SD card fell out of its slot. It was still readable and full of video files. I transferred them to my computer and sorted them by date. There were 23 clips in total, mostly shot over 2 days in December 2013. Outside, it was cold and quiet winter. I turned up the heat, brewed some coffee, and began watching through each file. Knowing nothing about the camera's owners or what they had been through, I decided to summarize the normal or unremarkable parts and transcribe the rest. File 1 * shot on a cold morning. The filmer was clearly testing camera settings in front of their house. No address was visible, and it was a typical residential area, making it hard to pinpoint. Snow covered the ground. The clip began with the filmer saying, "All right," while panning from the empty box of the new camera. They were sitting in their messy car, focusing on the house a few seconds before the video ended. File 2 * the timestamp showed this clip was shot several hours later. A young woman about 30 was watching water boil on the stove. She was petite, with brown hair, and cheerful, with noticeably large blue eyes. This was clearly the filmer's girlfriend. Both radiated vitality, as if they had their whole lives ahead of them. They were obviously not married, and perhaps only a few months into their relationship. I learned their names when the guy teased her with the camera, and she said, "I hope you didn't spend too much on this new toy." I won't use their real names, let's call them Mike and Jenna. Both clearly adored each other, and the clip ended with him telling her, "This is much better than the old one. The mall shots are going to look great with this." Jenna laughed while stirring sauce on the stove. File 3 * Mike filmed a backyard football game at another house. Although shot only a week later, there was no snow, and people wore only t-shirts, clearly in a warmer region. It was a Thanksgiving gathering, and Mike filmed 3 younger cousins playing football, trying out dynamic sports angles. The clip lasted about 10 minutes, with everyone joking happily. The cousins seemed to really like Mike, though he kept refusing to join the game. Towards the end, Jenna came out the front door and called everyone in for dinner. File 4 * Mike and Jenna visited a local mall on Black Friday. This mall was large, 2-storied, and thriving. It was packed. Mike filmed a few minutes of Santa Claus in the mall and a long line of children waiting for their turn. Jenna looked at the camera and smiled. Mike remarked that he hadn't seen a mall this busy in years. This scene made me miss the pre-pandemic era too. File 5 * Mike made his first appearance on video at the mall 10 minutes later. Jenna tried her hand at filming while Mike tried to entertain her with grand gestures, as if introducing the place to a huge, adoring audience. He said something about the mall, but the crowd's noise drowned him out. The camera wasn't really known for good audio quality. This scene lasted a few minutes while Jenna practiced holding the camera steady. Towards the end, she suggested buying a tripod for the camera, and Mike agreed. File 6 * This is where things started to get interesting. It was December 15th, and Jenna was trying out the camera again at dusk. Mike walked past the frame a few times while Jenna panned. They were filming in front of Sleepy Pines Mall, which had just closed. Snow covered the deserted parking lot. Mike tried to open the door, looking disappointed when he found it locked. His frustrated voice rang out. He said they should have come yesterday, and now it was too late. Jenna reassured Mike that there must be an entrance somewhere, that someone must have forgotten to lock one of the many doors. At this point, I realized they were amateur urban explorers, though it seemed they only focused on malls. From Mike's reply, saying that wasn't a good idea, I guessed they had never broken into a place before. I double-checked the closing date of Sleepy Pines, December 14th. They had just missed their chance to legally and easily film a dead mall. Mike seemed ready to give up, recounting how successful their last visit to another regional mall had been and how their follower count wouldn't grow at this rate. But Jenna wasn't discouraged. She wanted to cheer her boyfriend up and said that since they had driven an hour to get there, they should at least try to get inside. Mike sighed, nodded, and smiled. File 7 * This segment was shot half an hour later, and it was dark. Jenna held the camera, filming both of them. They stood under a flickering wall light on the side of the mall, near a slightly ajar service door. Both looked excited, but they were clearly still amateurs, new to this hobby. "Hey everyone, this is Mike and Jenna," Jenna said with an awkward smile. We're at Sleepy Pines Mall, and we're about to explore it together. If you've watched our first 5 videos, you'll know we're both into this kind of thing. Tonight, we're just going to sneak in for a quick look and then come back in the daytime tomorrow. Make sure it's really spooky in there now. All right, let's go, Mike added and stepped inside. He opened the door, motioning for viewers to follow, while Jenna mounted the camera on her shoulder rig. The service corridor inside was very dark, and the 2013-era camera didn't have good low-light sensors. The screen was full of digital noise as they made their way deeper into the mall, stumbling over some equipment boxes and cleaning supplies that hadn't been moved. They barely spoke until they found another door and entered a corridor leading to the main central area of the building. Most of the mall's lights were still on, but the mural was shrouded in shadow, making the blank, staring faces even more unsettling in the nearly empty building. For a few minutes, the exploring couple wandered around, filming the abandoned stores. They reached the other end of the mall, then returned to where they started, saying almost nothing while recording. The clip ended with a 10-second shot of the mural, during which Mike chuckled as Jenna said, "Yeah, that looks a little scary." File 8, *, these two definitely didn't have a script for their second, longer filming session. They chatted casually about how they felt about the place and their previous visits to other malls, just to fill the silence. Jenna was at least a decent camera person, though her boyfriend didn't seem to offer much interesting information or anecdotes. If they weren't planning to add engaging narration in post-production, they'd just have 2 very boring videos. Around the 5th minute of the clip, as Jenna filmed the closed discount cinema, Mike finally shared some personal stories. "I learned that he had lived in the area as a child and had many fond memories of visiting Sleepy Pines when it was bustling on weekends and almost no stores were closed. His earliest memories were coming here with his dad at age 5. Must have been 91, right?" he told Jenna. "I met Santa right over there." He pointed to the wide open space under the skylight in the mall's center. "It's sad how places like this end up. Memories fade over time, you know." "Is that why you were so upset you missed its last day?" Jenna asked, now keeping him in frame as if interviewing him. He shrugged. "I stopped by a year ago when it was already pretty bad. Coming here then was just symbolic. Anyway, we're here now, right?" He paused and looked away. "You ready to head out? We can film more in the daytime tomorrow, just keep the door unlocked." "Yeah, this place is starting to creep me out. Empty malls at night are just unnatural." They turned and headed towards the corridor where they had entered. On the way, Jenna suddenly stopped and swung the camera around. She stared into a pitch-black corridor, so dark that the camera's sensor couldn't pick up anything. A sign taped to it indicated that the mall's security center was at the end of the hallway. She paused there longer than usual, and Mike, off-screen, asked what she was looking at. "Don't you hear that?" Jenna asked, her voice anxious. I turned the volume all the way up, but nothing unusual came through my headphones. If she heard something, the camera didn't pick it up. Jenna kept staring into the corridor, as if frozen by fear rather than curiosity. Finally, Mike had to pull her away to break her focus. Only then did she seem to snap out of a trance. The clip ended with Mike looking at her and asking, "What's wrong with you?" If Jenna answered, she did so after the camera was off. At this point, I opened YouTube and searched for their names, adding mall to the search box, which helped me find their page. They were really just starting out. Their channel had only 6 subscribers, 5 videos with only a few views each, and no posts for over 7 years. I scrolled through their videos, all were visits to other malls, and none seemed out of the ordinary. Their newest videos started to show signs of professionalism with added narration, which they really needed. Mike shared some historical information about the empty mall in another state they had visited. He spoke with enthusiasm. Mike and Jenna smiled throughout their trip, seeming to enjoy wandering through a mall full of memories. They were one of the first channels exploring dead malls on YouTube, and the channel had potential to grow. But seeing their channel inactive for 7 years further confirmed my suspicion that something bad had happened to them. A few minutes of Google searching revealed that they had been reported missing in early January 2014, at least 2 weeks after they started filming this unfortunate video. Of course, I felt the urge to jump to the end to find out what happened, but I tried to resist and continued to watch each file in order, experiencing this journey with them as the first viewer of their final expedition. Reviewing the last few minutes of the clip, I noticed 2 random pink pixels appearing on the video. I knew this was a sign of sensor damage, and I traced it back to when Jenna pointed the camera into the dark hallway. After 30 seconds, 1 dead pixel appeared. A moment later, the next one appeared, as if something at the end of the hallway was emitting light or an invisible energy phenomenon that was gradually damaging the camera's sensor. But I didn't know what could do that, apart from a powerful laser or radiation. I eagerly moved on to the next clip. File 9, *, these dead pixels persisted throughout the video. This time, I saw the exterior of Sleepy Pines Mall in the early morning. Mike stood at a side door, his breath visible in the cold air. He gave Jenna a thumbs up, then she stepped forward and turned the camera on both of them. "I'm Mike and I'm Jenna," then both said, "and today we're exploring Sleepy Pines Mall." "Cute," they said. They went inside and to the central area without cutting the scene, though there was no reason to film in one continuous shot. It seemed Mike had done more research at the hotel the night before because he began talking about some basic information about the mall. Its opening date, the architect, a bit of the area's history, some controversies about its construction and maintenance, and the stores that had come and gone. All were covered, though unscripted. Mike remembered all these details and spoke fluently from one point to another. Still, credit to him for remembering so much and saying it all in one take. "Is this shot okay?" he asked as they returned to the central area where the fountain still held a few coins and was half full of stagnant water. He laughed after Jenna softly replied, "And all right, keep that shot." So it wasn't really a first take. I don't know how many takes they had tried, as they probably deleted previous clips to save memory. Before Jenna stopped filming, Mike wandered around a bit, looking into the empty stores. Finally, he realized the red light was still on. "You're still filming, Mike. I think we should check out security." Mike sighed, looking a bit annoyed. "You still want to go in there? Come on, we've pretty much seen everything. Let's just get every angle before they tear this place down. Otherwise, there'll be rooms, that'll be forgotten forever, nothing preserved." "Jenna, I don't think we need to be that thorough," Mike said softly. "But last night, you kept talking about your visits here with family and friends, your memories of the holiday decorations and cheap movies here," she added. "Really, Jen? You're saying all this right now while filming? At least turn the camera off," he replied, surprised. The frame held for a few more seconds before Mike, annoyed, stepped forward, reaching for the camera. He was about to touch it when the footage ended. I guess every couple has their arguments, but it was strange to argue about this. It seemed Jenna felt something calling to her. File 10, * Mike now stood in front of the dark corridor, but sunlight from a nearby skylight now prevented it from being pitch black. Mike seemed a bit reluctant, but I understood. I myself knew that sometimes you have to do what your loved one wants, even if you might not like it. "All right, so we're just going to quickly walk through this hallway, okay?" he said, his usual enthusiasm gone from his voice. "Only people who steal or film without permission would go in here, right? Disgusting criminals." "Mike," Jenna exclaimed. He chuckled awkwardly and said, "All right, let's go check it out." As they started walking into the corridor, another dead pixel appeared on the camera. The closer they got, the more corrupted pixels appeared as the sensor was permanently damaged. But Jenna didn't notice, because at this point the camera was mounted on her shoulder and Mike was leading the way. The light quickly became too dim for the camera to pick up anything, but Mike turned on his phone's flashlight, helping the camera capture what was in the illuminated area. They entered the security office and stood still for a few seconds. In the frame was an old desk and a surveillance area. "What was that?" Mike asked. "Did you hear that? It sounds like electrical sizzling," Jenna replied. "That's weird, that's really weird. Jenna, what are we doing here? What if someone gets electrocuted? Please, let's get out of here," she said, sounding disappointed. All right, I thought there'd be something cooler." She turned to leave, but then turned back to look at Mike, realizing he was still standing there, staring intently into a small room next to them. His flashlight shone on a sign that read, "Lost and Found." At this moment, Mike himself seemed drawn in and just wanted to know what was behind that door. Without a word, he opened the door and stepped inside. Jenna silently followed. What followed was hard to describe. The video was almost completely dark, It was unclear why Jenna didn't point the camera at what Mike was looking at until the end of this clip. The light from his phone only flared at the edge of the frame. Both were observing something strange. "What is this?" Jenna asked. "I don't know, never seen anything like it." Mike shook his head. "Oh my God, it looks like it's moving. Mike, don't!" she screamed, but it was too late. "It's warm, how is this thing here?" He was fiddling with it in his hands. "Stop it, Mike, it's dangerous," she yelled. "What? There's nothing cursed about this, Jen. I think I should take this out into the light to get a better look." "Oh God," he ignored her words and continued to prod it. "What did you do, Mike? What's it doing?" She pointed at him in fear. "I don't know, I didn't." They turned and ran out of the room, but the camera still didn't pick up anything they might have been hearing. Both became panicked, and the video, with the little footage visible, became violently shaky. By now, pink pixels had spread throughout the video, completely obscuring some small parts of the frame. Their screams echoed in the last few seconds of the clip, then abruptly ended in darkness. I don't know what kind of horror they might have experienced. I would think they were dead if this was the last file on the memory card, or, at best, someone had found the camera and recorded more before they, too, mysteriously disappeared. Analyzing the clip frame by frame, I noticed two faint, almost burned-in elements as they turned to run. Mike's flashlight swept across the strange object they had found. It was a kind of totem, made of some dark, unknown material about 1 meter tall. It stood in the middle of the lost and found room on the floor and was the only thing in there. Its surface was covered with carvings of angular patterns, though calling them patterns wouldn't be quite right, as there was no actual repeating design. The lines spiraled and broke off randomly, not very pleasing to the eye. It looked like a figure created by someone, almost resembling something familiar and recognizable, yet not something that truly existed. Still, it wasn't completely alien or like something made by a forgotten tribe. Perhaps it was just a piece of art someone found at a yard sale decades ago, its history and origin now forgotten. But it wasn't the strange statue itself that I found truly terrifying. I don't think Mike and Jenna saw them before the light on his phone suddenly went out, leaving them in darkness. I couldn't be sure if they were moving or just twitching in place, but on the walls of the security room were a proliferation of black, long, thick worms. I don't know how else to describe them, but it was clear in the few frames I saw that they were not light illusions or optical phenomena. The worms covered the walls, as if eating away at its surface. After rewatching the entire clip several times, I closed the video and tried to process what I had just seen. I was almost afraid to think about what would happen next and delayed opening the next file by going to make more coffee. It was almost midnight when I decided to continue, opening the recording from 3 hours after the previous one. File 11, *. I opened this file with no expectations, and it immediately surpassed all imagination. Although dead pixels still dotted the screen, the terrifying experience the couple had just gone through no longer seemed to be on their minds. Initially, it looked as if they had moved to a different location and changed into new clothes, or rather, old clothes, as Mike looked like he had just stepped out of the 80s, standing in a brightly lit fitting room and changing clothes. In just a few short hours, Mike stood there smiling, but there was an anxious twitch in his eyes. It was also evident in Jenna's filming, as the image was now constantly shaking. The camera was no longer stably mounted, given the video's shakiness. "Hey everyone," Mike said after taking a deep breath. "You'll never believe what happened to us if we get out of here. We will get out," Jenna replied, though her voice lacked confidence. Right, yeah, it'll be better if we just show you ourselves." He pointed to the mirror in the fitting room, and Jenna moved closer to film herself in the mirror. She now looked sharp in a striking red blazer and capris, her hair elaborately styled, as if it had taken hours to do. But the camera itself was even stranger. She clutched it with both hands, trembling, bringing it close to the mirror, and it was no longer a GoPro. It wasn't even a digital camera anymore. Somehow, it had become a vintage Polaroid, one of those instant cameras. "Yeah, weird, right?" Mike continued. "It doesn't have a screen anymore, but it has buttons and all the info is in the viewfinder. I don't know why or how, but our clothes changed too. Like, I don't know what to say anymore. Oh my God, we're going to get millions of views, honey. We're going to be on TV. Scientists will want." "Mike, can we just get out of here? This place is so suffocating," she said, trembling softly. All right, yeah, keep filming, Mike stubbornly replied. Both left the fitting room and stepped into a bright and busy department store, exactly like the one that used to be in Sleepy Pines. But I hadn't seen such a busy scene in years, and as Mike and Jenna remained silent, beginning to lead viewers through the store, I gradually understood why this place looked so bizarre. Like their clothes, the outfits on all the customers and staff, and those hanging on racks and shelves, everything was old-fashioned. It was all fashion from about 30 years ago. Mike even picked up a polo shirt with a goofy smile and brought the price tag close to the camera, exclaiming about how cheap it was. Get it? He asked the viewers. I mean, what happened is pretty obvious, right? At first, we didn't believe it either, but oh, excuse me, sir, he said to an elderly customer who had bumped into him, who just turned to look at him with a curious gaze. Come on, let's go see the rest of the mall. We haven't left the store yet, need a moment to calm down, Jenna cried out in fear. We should have gone back, Mike, Jenna retorted with a disdainful look. You're taking this way too lightly. Why aren't you terrified by what's happening to us? Mike grimaced, admitting, part of me is scared, Jen, but we can't keep worrying and being afraid while exploring this place. At least we should record everything in case something happens, and the camera is the only thing left. Don't say that, Mike. None of this is normal, Jenna sobbed. Hey, come on, I'm here, I'm with you. We'll get through this, Mike tried to reassure her, but failed. Jenna started crying and the camera lowered, pointing at the floor. Mike could be heard saying, "We'll talk," before the clip ended. I hastily opened the next segment. File 12, asterisk just a few minutes later, the camera was now aimed at Sleepy Pines' main thoroughfare, past the department store entrance. The frame remained static for about 30 seconds as dozens of customers walked by, many glancing briefly at the camera. Mike then stepped into the frame and led Jenna out into the rest of the mall, though her body language showed she was still reluctant. I pulled my chair closer to the screen, watching intently. I heard a familiar, nostalgic sound coming through my headphones. I turned on noise cancellation to fully immerse myself in the experience. Mike was at a loss for words at the baffling situation as they approached the exit. I hadn't yet had time to fully process the previous clip or how meticulously the store's appearance could have been staged, but the obvious, albeit strange, answer hadn't quite formed in my mind as a logical thought. Mike wasn't the only one startled when a large woman suddenly stepped into the frame. For a second, I felt like I was exploring uncharted territory with them. And the next second, a stout woman in a threatening suit of clothes was about to spray them with an amber-colored perfume. We said no samples, ma'am, Mike snapped. Oh my God. Oh, but this is our new autumn scent. There's nothing else like it on the market. Just a little sniff, and you'll fall in love all over again. The woman seemed aggressive and kept trying to spray Mike and Jenna as they squeezed past. For a fleeting moment, her twisted smile almost filled the frame as the camera nearly hit her. What's her problem? Jenna asked as they reached the central area. They can be weird, Mike sighed, looking up at the skylight. Just not that bad from what I remember. Crazy, you okay? She didn't spray you, did she? Mike, where is asterisk this place? Jenna asked, pointing the camera at the ceiling, revealing a blue sky through the glass panels. The camera returned to Mike, and for a few seconds he smiled in a terrifying, almost creepy way like the perfume lady's smile. I could hear the faint, ambient music playing more clearly. It was genuine music, the soft pop versions rarely played anywhere anymore, fitting strangely as Mike smiled goofily. Toto's Africa played throughout the area. Do you really want me to say it? Mike asked. There has to be another explanation, right? This can't all be real, baby. We're in the past, Jen. We just found some kind of time travel device, I'm sure of it, Mike said, turning to look around the mall, then added, I'm guessing it's 90, maybe 91. Those 80s fashion styles are fading out and everything is full of color. You're talking about the post-Cold War era, Jen. So why did our clothes change? The camera changed too. Where are our phones? We need to make sure there's an exit or a way back before we try to have fun. I don't want to get stuck here. We're not here to have fun. We're making history or even becoming a part of it. We're filming the past, baby. We'll record everything and then find that strange device to get back to 2013. But can we stay here for a bit? I mean, this decade is much better than the one we left, full of social media nonsense and stupid challenges. I wish you wouldn't say that, Mike. Our friends and family are there, Michael. Our future is there too. We can't stay. Mike sighed. He didn't want to argue further. He just wanted to explore what he believed was the past, a fragment of his childhood memories. The footage lingered for a few more seconds on Mike's impatient expression before the camera moved downwards. I saw Jenna's shoes, now transformed into red high-top sneakers. File 13, asterisk this clip, over 10 minutes long, was a full tour of the mall. Jenna silently filmed each store they passed while Mike tried to offer some commentary, but he was frequently distracted, amazed each time he looked into a store or saw someone in vintage attire or spotted an item he loved from that era. He made Jenna stop for a few minutes at Sam Goody's so she could film every cassette tape, CD, and videotape, appearing at least in a few frames, while Mike was overtly excited. Jenna, however, seemed wary of the crowd of shoppers, who looked almost as if they had stepped out of a strange world, like empty, emotionless automatons staring at them as if they were intruders. Jenna noticed it, and so did I, but Mike barely paid attention to anything unusual about the people around him, beyond himself and his girlfriend. He was swept up in the nostalgic allure of a romanticized past. They walked past a brightly lit barbershop with colorful geometric shapes on the walls and a checkerboard-tiled floor. The three women inside all had the exact same hairstyle. The small cinema in the mall had a marquee listing movies like Total Recall asterisk, Gremlins 2 asterisk, Terminator 2 asterisk, asterisk City Slickers asterisk, The Rocketeer asterisk, and, ironically, asterisk Back to the Future Part Roman 3 asterisk. I saw popular old stores that no longer exist today. KB Toys, Walden Books, Merry-Go-Round for Teens. Yes, I remember these places too, now that I think about it, but each has its own time, and I don't idolize the past like Mike. Although seeing the old stores in modern high definition, ignoring the corrupted pixels, was certainly interesting, I just hoped both of them could find a way out. Sleepy Pines looked very different. There were long stripes of red, blue, and yellow paint on the walls. Neon lights illuminated indoor plants and rest areas with square chairs and sofas. Coin-operated games were placed in front of the arcade for children too young to go in and play the machine games. I could empathize with Mike, as a child in this moment in time, wanting to go back and feel something real if he found the present shallow and hopeless. But idealizing the past wouldn't help these two young people find their way out. Meanwhile, the cheerful melody of the mall's background music only added to the growing anxiety I felt about a situation I couldn't change. "Wow," Mike said, his voice full of emotion, as they reached the Sears at the end of the mall. "This is amazing, Jen, an unforgettable experience. You got it all on film, right? Okay, now can we go back to the lost and found? We need to find that thing to take us home," Jenna said tiredly. "I wonder if I'd see a younger version of myself if I waited around here. Baby, I don't think you appreciate all of this. How often do you get a chance to take your girlfriend back to the past and show her a place that means so much to you?" He waited for her reaction, but there was none. He sighed, nodded, and said, "All right, get a good shot of the mural on the way back." They returned to the main area of the mall, where Jenna aimed the camera at the mural. It was unfinished, and thus looked even more eerie. 2/3 of the forest was painted, but the 5 figures standing in front were only vague, white outlines. I hadn't known the mural wasn't completed from the start. This reinforced my idea that the crudely drawn settlers and Native Americans were added later by a second artist. Perhaps they simply wanted to cover something on the original background. "Strange, huh?" Mike said, looking at the artwork. "Guess we were brought back to the final days when this mural was being worked on." "Mike," Jenna muttered, urging him to focus on getting them home, but she was interrupted when a mall security guard approached and reminded them that filming in the mall without permission wasn't allowed. He didn't realize their bizarre camera was actually recording video. "Yeah, no problem," Mike said as Jenna lowered the camera to her hip, pointing it at the floor. "Can I check the lost and found area? We think we left something there earlier." The clip ended abruptly, as I had grown accustomed to. File 14, asterisk the next file was shot 4 hours later. I was genuinely anxious about what might have happened during that time before opening it. Mike and Jenna stared at the camera together. They were back in a department store fitting room where they might feel safer. The overhead lights flickered, and now both looked visibly stressed. Hey everyone, Mike struggled for words, wrapping an arm around Jenna. This is where we have to tell you that things are not okay. I still don't know how or why we ended up in the past, and we can't find the thing that brought us here. We've searched everywhere. Every store, every room, every staff area we could think of, and it's so weird having to sneak around, you know? Everyone here keeps staring at us, and I don't think anyone leaves this place. They've all been shoppers since we got here. Something is wrong with this place. I should have realized it earlier, but I was too stupid, too caught up in all of this. The doors are all locked, Jenna said through tears, seemingly coming to terms with their situation. We tried every exit and they didn't budge. We tried public phones, but there's not even a signal. I'll find a way to get out of here, but in case I don't and you find these videos, please call my parents. Their home number is. Mike, stop, Jenna suddenly demanded. She pointed to a gap under the fitting room door and Mike turned the camera towards it. After a few seconds, a pair of large feet in high heels entered the frame. The shoes faced the door, and the door began to shake violently. Jenna could be heard sobbing. The door continued to shake for about a minute, filled with tension, before the noise stopped. Without a word, the large woman on the other side of the door turned away. Despite her panic, Jenna managed to lift the camera, almost dropping it, as she filmed Mike cautiously opening the door and looking around. He motioned for her to come out, and they exited the store by weaving behind racks of clothes, keeping as silent as possible. The surrounding shoppers continued to stare at them but didn't move or interfere. Just as they were about to escape, Mike turned around and filmed the perfume lady standing near the store entrance. I recognized the shoes and suddenly understood. She was stalking them. Without warning, she turned towards them, forcing both to quickly duck behind a display table full of polo shirts. I paused on a frame and saw her face looked truly horrific. Her large, round face was caked with bright red lipstick, garish blue eyeshadow, and exaggerated pink blush, but it only added to her ghastly appearance, with matted hair and crooked, yellow teeth. A few seconds later, the camera peeked back up. She was gone. "Where is she?" Jenna whispered. "I don't know. We just need to get out of the store. We shouldn't have come back here. We knew the doors would be locked, just like the others." "Mike, we need to," Jenna was about to say when she heard a rustling sound. Both turned and saw the perfume lady looking at them from above a clothes rack. She was slumped down on the metal bars, her large, flabby arms hanging down like a fat sloth, with cold, murderous eyes. She curled her lips into a distorted smile and held up the perfume bottle as if it were fused to her hand. Mike and Jenna quickly gathered their courage, stood up, and ran as fast as they could towards the store exit. The sounds behind them indicated their pursuer was knocking over clothes racks and crashing into several other display counters in pursuit. Jenna's voice was filled with panic and terror as she and Mike dashed out of the store. She turned the camera slightly to capture the deranged woman chasing them. She seemed to transform into a wild animal, running on all fours, with black, shark-like eyes. Jenna screamed in terror as the mad creature got closer and closer, but the perfume lady stopped right at the threshold, as if an invisible barrier prevented her from crossing. After catching his breath, Mike flipped her off, and the woman just smiled back, standing up straight and returning to the cosmetics counter, the smile still plastered on her face. "What was that, Mike? She's not human. No one runs like that," Jenna screamed at him. "We need to get out of this place immediately." "I know, Jen, I know. At least she can't leave the damn store." Mike tried to compose himself as the shoppers continued to stare at him. Most just stood there, like background characters in a video game who had completed their movement cycle. He raised the camera to film the sky through the glass ceiling, showing it was now twilight. The mall's neon lights now bathed everything in shades of red, purple, pink, and blue. I also heard the music had slowed and become distorted, like an electronic toy running out of batteries. That sound seemed to bother Mike. He closed his eyes, thinking, but couldn't calm down. "It's like this place is starting to fall apart," he mumbled, exactly the thought that had just crossed my mind. "Jen, we need to find something heavy, a hammer, a crowbar, or at least a trash can. We'll break the doors and get out." He pushed forcefully through the crowd of zombie-like staring people, yelling at them to get out of the way. Jenna followed some distance behind, enduring every blank stare directed at her. They stopped briefly next to a 1990 red Corvette, where a small film crew seemed to be trying to shoot a commercial. Lights shone on the sweating face of an older man in a gray suit. He repeated the line, "So much is happening at Sleepy Pines Mall, why not stop by and see what's new today?" Several times as Jenna also filmed the scene. Mike, impatient, stepped into the frame, but the filming continued. "You people have been here for hours," Mike said angrily to the film crew. "Who are you? How did you get in here? What ad company hired you?" "Mike, stop," Jenna pleaded softly. "Don't bother them, they're not even real. They're just operating like some kind of program with no repercussions." Mike knocked over a light and an expensive film camera, then grabbed the tripod. Jen just stood there, stunned, as Mike carried the heavy object away, and Mike was right, because the actor continued to repeat the exact same commercial, and the film crew maintained their movements. The camera pointed at the floor, and the clip ended. File 15, *, this segment began with Mike forcefully slamming the tripod against a glass door. He seemed to have been doing so for a while, as he looked exhausted. He repeatedly used the heavy metal base of the tripod to hit the glass, but it didn't even crack. The glass looked no different from the brick wall outside in the parking lot. Vintage cars from the 90s were parked everywhere, but I wasn't sure if they were real. There were no shadows outside, while inside the mall were hundreds of people. Perhaps everything beyond the mall's walls didn't even exist. Whatever had brought them back to the past, perhaps it didn't extend beyond this building. Jenna's soft sobs could be heard. She turned towards a fallen trash can on the floor and lightly kicked it, indicating that she had also tried to use it to break the door but had given up. I also noticed that the music was now completely gone, replaced by a monotonous humming sound. Mike hit the door a total of 12 times, then collapsed to the floor, exhausted. The recording of his efforts ended there. File 16, *, the camera was placed on a table in the food court. It seemed late, but all the stores were still open. Both had sodas and slices of pizza on paper plates in front of them, but both hesitated to eat. Not only were they gradually losing hope of escaping, but they were also afraid of the food. I didn't blame them. They were sitting in darkness, illuminated only by neon lights. "Should we eat this?" Mike asked, his voice lifeless. "I mean, who knows what it's made of?" Jenna mumbled. "We have to eat something. I'm so hungry." Mike looked into the camera, his voice tired. "Yeah, the clock here says 2 a.m. and everything just keeps going. This mall is open 24/7 now, I guess. We won't last long without eating or drinking. If this ends badly, at least you'll know it wasn't the perfume lady's fault." In one of Mike's rare acts of courage, he took a sip of his drink before Jenna. She initially drank slowly, then more. Jenna did the same with her cup, and then they seemed more confident about trying something solid. Tastes like Dr. Pepper," Mike said, then looked at his slice of pizza and it looked all right, although he thought everything here seemed somewhat unreal. "All right, before it gets cold." He took a bite, chewed, and finally swallowed, finding it edible and the risk acceptable. He quickly finished the rest while Jenna still hesitated and ate slowly. "It's so dark here," she said, looking around. The ceiling lights had been off for hours, but no one seemed to notice. "We'll try to sleep in the arcade," Mike said. "All the game machines are still running. I think that's the brightest place." "What's going to happen to this place?" Jenna added. "Maybe at some point the dream will end and we'll wake up," Mike sighed tiredly. "The people at Sparrow don't even say anything or ask us to pay." "Yeah," Mike said sarcastically, "I guess that's why the chain is dying." Both sat drinking and eating in silence for a while before the footage ended. File 17, *, this segment took place entirely in the mall's old arcade, which had closed in 1998. The only light source was the screens of the game machines running in demo mode, but there were so many that the arcade was still the brightest place in the mall at this time. This time, Mike held the camera, but I didn't know what he wanted to record besides the misery they were experiencing. He walked around the game machines, muttering something unclear. Children and teenagers filled the room, but no one moved. Some had their hands on joysticks or buttons, others just stood and stared with their arms hanging loosely. Mike tried to get a child's attention, bringing the camera close to its face. The child's eyes were vacant, staring straight ahead. Light from the game's screen reflected in its dilated eyes. They were like zombies. Mike cursed, then walked towards the prize counter, filming the toys he would never get a chance to win. "I went to a good university," Mike told his only viewer, turning the camera to himself so he could speak with frustration. I had a great job lined up. So what if I like the 80s and 90s? That doesn't mean I want to be stuck in some weird, messed up version of nostalgia like this. I never want to set foot in another mall again, and this camera's battery should have been dead ages ago, but the icon still shows full power. Nothing is right, everything is wrong. We're never getting out. Still filming, he walked to one of the large game machines, the kind with seats so players could sit inside and immerse themselves in the game. It was a classic racing game with a steering wheel. Jenna was curled up in the seat, facing the wall, seemingly asleep or trying to sleep. Since this was filmed about 5 hours after the previous segment, I guessed Mike hadn't been able to sleep or had given up trying. He decided to let Jen sleep peacefully and slumped onto the carpet. On the screen, a few children, like soulless silhouettes, stood silently in front of the game machines. Mike heard a loud noise outside, metal echoing down the mall corridor. He jumped up and pointed the camera towards the dark hallway, where only faint neon lights pierced through. His breathing was shallow and fast. Nothing appeared, at least within his sight, but he eventually ran into a small electrical closet without warning Jenna of the potential danger, and closed the door. After a few seconds, the image went completely black, full of digital noise and dead pixels. The video ended. I guessed he finally fell asleep in that cramped space, and this experience was probably starting to wear down his nerves. File 18, *, the camera was pointed up at a skylight on the ceiling. Early morning light began to filter through. It must have been around 8 a.m., meaning Mike and Jenna had been in this mall for almost 20 hours. Mike panned the camera down to show the mural and the fountain below, where Jenna was scooping water and washing her face. Around her were soulless shoppers, all motionless, even though the mall seemed to never open or close. This version of Sleepy Pines, whether it existed in the past or not, was merely a memory of the mall, existing when someone remembered it. The times it was empty and motionless were not part of the chaotic amalgam of its glory days. The speaker system was still playing some kind of sound, but now all I heard was a soulless buzzing. Mike approached Jenna, leaning forward and looking at her reflection in the fountain. She looked at him as he approached, her expression tired, not a hint of a smile on her face. I was still worried about Mike's mental state, but she didn't seem scared. She was just tired, or seemed to have begun accepting this imprisonment. "Jen, are you hungry?" Mike asked in a monotone voice. "Cabin store seems to be open. I could buy you something." She shook her head and replied, "Mike, today we have to find a way out at all costs. We can't give up, we can't." "I know, I'll try another way. I'm thinking about the ventilation system," Mike interrupted Jen, who seemed about to say something, but then just continued to look down at the fountain. After a few seconds, she looked dubious, leaning closer to the water's surface. The camera was still pointed at her, but I guessed Mike was looking elsewhere. Jenna pulled a coin from the fountain and examined it closely. I heard her softly murmur, "Michael, look at this." Mike didn't hear. Suddenly, he yelled, "Run!" The camera quickly swung around, and I saw the perfume lady approaching at an unstoppable speed. Jenna was far behind her. This was the first time she had left the invisible boundaries of the store, and both Mike and Jen seemed stunned by this. The large woman still held the perfume bottle in her hand, but no one could guess what she truly wanted. Not wanting to wait to find out, both started to run. File 19, *, an hour after the previous video ended, Jen turned the camera on, filming Mike huddled between washing machines, peeking around the corner of one of the large white box-like appliances. They were somewhere in the Sears store. "I think I finally lost her," Mike gasped, slumping onto a washing machine. "She's a real crazy bitch. Why is she the only one still moving?" He shook his head, then looked up, realizing the camera was filming. "Mike," Jenna said softly, "maybe there's an exit or something." "What are you talking about? Don't get your hopes up," he grumbled. "But I found one here, look." She handed him a coin, and he examined both sides of it. He looked at Jenna as if she were crazy, but then realized why she found this important. It had state artwork on the back. "This thing is only from around 2000, Mike said. "Yeah, it's from 2005, I think. The coins in the fountain aren't affected by anything here, maybe because of the water?" Jenna asked again. "It makes no sense," he grimaced. "Nothing here makes sense, but maybe there's something we can do with the water. Whatever brought us to this weird version of the past, maybe the water is the answer, the way out." Mike frowned. So what now? Jump into the fountain, hold our breath, and hope for a miracle? Or do you want to open all the faucets in the mall and flood it? How does this discovery help? She replied, We have to keep trying, Mike, and we need to talk. We have to understand what happened to us, what this place really is, and why we're here. I don't think we're really in the past. Didn't you see how dark it got last night? Why isn't there any Christmas decoration here, and all the fake people in the mall are dressed like it's summer, but the daylight doesn't last as long as it used to? Yeah, maybe, Mike sighed. I think that device regenerated local history by altering all the surrounding material, but it's not perfect and can't sustain this for long. It's unstable, everything is slowly falling apart, and our time is running out, she said. That's crazy, he added. Do you have a better theory? You think we really went back in time? She asked. Mike looked blank for a moment, then replied, So what about the perfume lady? I don't know, maybe she's the guardian of this place. Maybe she's what's keeping us here. She's hunting us, she's a threat. So let's try to kill her, what do you say? She replied. How? He asked, and I considered it a rather foolish question. We can start by trying. Why not hit her in the head and see what happens? She's not real, Mike. No one here is real, she answered. All right, yeah, okay. We'll hit her in the head and see what falls out. Mike tried to put on a brave face for his girlfriend, but it was clear he didn't have the courage to do so. Just as he agreed to commit that unjustifiable act, both heard a noise, and he was just as startled as Jenna when they saw the perfume lady's silhouette appear in the light from the Sears parking lot exit. I wasn't sure if she was just standing there to threaten them or chasing them again. The video ended just as the couple started to run. File 20, asterisk with only 4 files left, I knew that Mike and Jenna's journey was nearing its end. This video opened with Mike holding the camera pointed at himself, with shoe boxes behind him, possibly in a Palace or Foot Locker store. His arm was wrapped around the tripod from earlier, resting on his shoulder as if it were the best weapon he could find. I think it's been over 24 hours since this started, he said. We're ready to face that crazy perfume bitch, both mentally and physically, but we still don't know where she is right now. But you guys have to see this. He stood up and walked to the store entrance where Jenna was standing guard and looking into the hallway. She held a metal bar in her hand, probably taken from a clothes rack, and a fire extinguisher in the other. Look, she mumbled. They're getting worse and worse. Mike approached a child nearby but kept a safe distance. A thick, viscous black liquid like hot tar was dripping from the boy's mouth. Smaller streams ran from its vacant eyes. Mike backed away and turned the camera to show the adults around them also experiencing the same condition. Still, they stood silently, doing nothing. Jenna moved closer into the frame and said, This is what I'm talking about, Mike. This place is falling apart. First, it's the complex things like people, and then everything else will follow, the entire building. But not us, right? Jenna didn't answer, but her eyes showed skepticism. They left the store, Jenna ready to attack with her metal bar. Everyone they passed was slowly disintegrating from within, but no one was aggressive or moving. Mike pointed the camera up at the skylights, where a thick black cloud was gradually obscuring the sunlight. As he panned down, one of the shopper's arms unexpectedly broke off. It simply fell to the ground, slowly dissolving into a puddle of black liquid. At this point, they couldn't utter a word, just silently accepting. Even the cinema marquee was distorted, as if glitching like a crashing computer program. The only 2 readable titles were Casablanca and Gone Girl *, neither film released during the time they thought they were stuck. The other text on the marquee was a jumble of letters and numbers, and a pile of them was falling to the floor next to the ticket counter. Mike turned away and focused on the fountain they were approaching. The mural behind it had lost all detail and was now just a deep black. Jenna ran to the fountain and looked down. She dipped her hands in the water, then stepped fully into it. The water reached below her knees. What are you really hoping will happen? Mike asked as he caught up to her. You're just getting all wet. It'll be hard to run in those soaked shoes, Jen. Maybe we won't have to run anymore if this is the way out. She looked down at her feet and murmured, Please do something. What are you hoping for? Mike asked. I don't know, maybe my shoes will change back, she replied wearily. Mike looked down at the fountain, bringing the camera close to the water's surface. He noticed the coins and picked one up to check its year of issue. You're right, he admitted. You've thought about this more than I have. Now anything is worth trying. He pointed the camera straight up at the sky for about a minute, a bit of his hair appearing in the frame as the thick, inky black clouds intensified above. After some time to think, he turned back and filmed a close-up of Jen's shoes. They were still red high-top sneakers, and Jenna's disappointment was evident. I don't know how long she had been standing in the fountain, as the video ended immediately after, with Mike trying to comfort her with reassuring words. File 21, asterisk more than 2 hours later, Mike again aimed the camera at the sky. Now, finally, the dense black mist had vanished, leaving only a thick fog that almost completely obscured the sunlight. It moved like boiling water, forming a writhing cloud over the upper half of Sleepy Pines. This murky mass reminded me of the worms crawling on the walls earlier, but everything was worse. The camera panned down to the central mall walls, where large tiles were coming loose as black liquid spread across the floor. Jen moved closer to the camera, trying to avoid stepping in the viscous puddles. She looked at Mike for a moment, then walked past him. "This place has become hell," he whispered into the microphone. Then he asked Jenna, "Should we do another sweep? The doors haven't changed. People and stores are almost gone, but the doors are still solid. If things are disintegrating or melting, an exit should appear." "Yeah, maybe, but we've walked back and forth so many times already. I'm going to check the food court to see if anything's left." "I don't know if that's a good idea," Mike said, but he decided to follow Jen anyway, and they walked through a corridor that looked like a cave dripping black tar, something clearly not man-made. I thought perhaps it was slowly being reabsorbed by whatever device had projected this imitation of the mall's past, a past that never truly existed. They reached the food court, now almost completely dark as the main light source, sunlight, was entirely blocked out. The food was now also black, devoid of color. Burgers, Chinese noodles and rice, and Sparrow's Italian dishes and pizza had lost their shape and color, turning into indistinct, slimy piles. "Nothing left," Jenna sighed. "Damn it, I'm so hungry." Mike nodded. "I just hope the food we ate earlier has digested enough so none of this disgusting stuff is inside us anymore." The two looked down at a shopper's head on the floor, detached from its body, still staring blankly into space in its own puddle of slime. They said nothing more. It seemed this sight was now too familiar. "Mike," Jenna said, as the camera was still pointed at the floor, "what is it, that kid?" "Are you kidding me?" Mike frowned. "What?" Mike walked forward, only raising the camera when he stood a few feet from a little boy. The boy looked about 5 or 6 years old, his internal organs seemed to still be intact, and he too stared blankly into space like all the others. I vaguely understood why Mike's voice suddenly filled with emotion before he confirmed, "Jen, is that me? How am I here, how?" Jenna moved closer to get a good look at the younger version of Michael, then tried to comfort him as he kept the camera pointed at the boy's eyes. "This makes no sense," she said. "How can you say that?" Mike retorted. "Whatever created this place, maybe it pulled from a data cache of faces, perhaps everyone who's ever been here." She waved her hand. "But that could be millions of people. How do you just see yourself now? How does that thing know who you are? This is all too much. It's playing with us." He replied, making his point. "We're never going to get answers. Let's go back and find a door, or just keep focusing on finding a way out until one opens." Mike took a deep breath, turning the camera back to show both of them, both looking tired. He gathered his courage and said, "The next time I turn this on, we're going to be filming our escape, or back in our hotel room. I'm fed up with this place. I think we should rebrand our channel after this." Both looked at each other and shared a brief kiss before the video ended. File 22, asterisk unfortunately, Mike had lied. This video, filmed 2 hours later, began with a shot of the skylight and the wall just beneath it. But now, finally, everything seemed to be returning to normal. The thick fog had disappeared, and the old mall wall from 2013 appeared clearer above the black slime, which was now dry and motionless. The substance now resembled a dry, crusted shell, with flakes turning to dust as they fell. It felt as if the 2013 version of the mall was slowly emerging from its cocoon. "Here we are, hope this is the last time," Mike said, adjusting the frame to include both of them in the shot. Their eyes were almost closed, looking utterly exhausted, as if they needed a week's sleep. We still haven't found a way out, but it seems like it's just a matter of waiting a bit longer. Sleepy Pines is slowly returning to normal, Jenna replied. Yeah, look. He panned 360 degrees, showing the entire central area and the three main corridors. All were blackened, even the floor, transforming the place into a crazy Dali painting. The black ooze absorbed all color and most light, but there was still enough sheen to clearly see the dripping wax texture and distorted shapes. They stood up to avoid sitting on the substance, with all chairs and sofas having already turned to slime. The fountain was now just a solid black basin, but still held water. Everyone had disappeared, dissolving into the floor. Mike sighed. That perfume monster has been missing for a while, so maybe we scared her off and everything's about to end. At this point, I also started to feel relieved. My heart rate, which had been fast for almost an hour, began to slow. I hoped the two had escaped, leaving the camera behind. I looked at the small camera on my desk, my mind still trying to comprehend how it had morphed into a completely different size and shape before returning to normal. Mike continued, "We still don't know where our phones went, so we hope to find a car, get some food, go back to the hotel, pull the curtains shut, and sleep. Sounds good, Jen?" He turned to look at Jenna, seeing her intently looking down at her shoes, and quickly brought them into frame. Her shoes had returned to modern sneakers. "Mike, it worked," Jenna whispered. Maybe. It just took quite a while. Do you feel anything else?" he asked softly. My feet felt numb for a second, and then I looked down and... She stopped abruptly as a loud cracking sound echoed through the central area. "What the hell was that?" Mike exclaimed, panning the camera across the scene and catching a section of the black, liquefied wall near KB Toys cracking open. "Jen, I think the speed is picking up. We might be able to get out in just a few minutes." "Oh, thank God," Jenna gasped. The wall cracked again. Then a stream of uncured ooze poured out. Mike backed away. All three of us watched in fear as a black, gnarled arm reached out from the opening. The clawed hand gripped the side, tearing apart the rest of the shell like a disgusting creature emerging from its cocoon. 4 other arms burst out and quickly tore away the shell. A grotesque, black, 7-foot-tall mass stepped out, with 4 legs and 9 arms twitching as if they were trying to escape their own body. The abhorrent form had at least 5 mouths, or more if looked at closely, but only a single eye protruded from its slimy shadow. Overlapping, raspy, monstrous voices howled, "Try our new scent for autumn." "Oh my God," Mike screamed, grabbing the tripod leaning against one of the benches. Before he could touch it, the creature let out a guttural rumble. This time, the camera recorded it. For Mike and Jenna, the sound was so painful they had to cover their ears. In doing so, Mike accidentally threw the camera to the floor. It fell at an angle, the lens stuck to the already slimy floor. From the moment the screaming started, the dead pixels reappeared faster than before, a new one every 2 or 3 seconds. I could still see just enough to make out what happened next. Despite the pain, both managed to grab their weapons, and as the creature lunged into the frame, Mike slammed it into its body and arms with the tripod with all his might. Jen thrust the metal bar into the creature's body, but the bar got stuck and slowly sank into the slime. Realizing she couldn't pull it out, she began spraying foam from the fire extinguisher onto the creature. The foam slowed it down, but both knew that alone wasn't enough. They needed to destroy it, or at least try. The creature's entire body was covered in foam, perhaps blinding it. Jenna shoved the entire fire extinguisher into one of its mouths. Mike used the tripod to push the extinguisher further in, forcing its handle firmly into the creature's mouth. More foam filled the creature, incapacitating it. Jenna grabbed Mike's hand and gestured towards the fountain, perhaps seeing it as their best option, though I wasn't sure what they expected from it. Nonetheless, they ran out of frame and jumped into the water. They didn't resurface before the video ended. In the last 10 seconds, after the foam stopped spraying from the creature's mouth, it collapsed to the floor and began crawling towards the fountain, howling and sprouting more arms as it moved. With more than half the frame filled with dead pixels, or just black as the lens sank into the ooze, the clip finally ended, probably because the camera was too badly damaged to record more. File 23, *, I wanted a complete ending, but perhaps I should have anticipated that I wouldn't get one. My computer didn't generate a thumbnail for this final file, so I knew something was wrong beforehand. The warning about file corruption didn't stop me from trying other ways to open it. A decent size, over 25 MB, surely there was something inside. Finally, after trying several file recovery programs and video editors, I managed to extract a small amount of data. The video was only 9 seconds long, but that didn't mean much when the entire file was heavily corrupted from the start. The audio was just a loud buzzing, similar to the sound the creature had emitted, and almost every frame in the video was an unreadable mess of green and black blocks. However, I still wanted to confirm that I had done everything I could, so I meticulously watched the video frame by frame, all 60 frames per second. Only 2 frames, one at the 5-second mark and one near the end, were intact and clearly visible, despite still having a multitude of pink dead pixels. The first frame was a static image of Sleepy Pines Mall in broad daylight, looking normal, with a few shoppers walking around. Many stores were closed or empty, but the arcade was still open, indicating this image was taken before '98, but after the events in the previous videos. The second frame took me back to where it all began, showing the totem in the lost and found room, blurred by the camera's movement. It was a duplicate frame from File 10. Hundreds of other frames remained corrupted, and the creation date of File 23 defaulted to the Unix epoch, January 1, 1970. I don't think this final file was created by pressing the record button. I guessed it was generated by a hardware error, perhaps during the camera's process of returning to its original state, but that didn't explain why it contained an image of the decaying mall, captured years later. I stayed up another hour into the night, searching for any information related to the mall or Mike and Jen. I found the commercial they had filmed with the Corvette on YouTube. I almost believed I could see the couple in the distance, but watching the 30-second commercial from that era repeatedly, no shoppers looked like them. Still, seeing the period-appropriate costumes and the mall's appearance made me understand how accurately the mysterious device had recreated the past. Then, around 4 a.m., as I was growing tired, something made me begin to doubt the authenticity of everything I had seen. Although Mike never mentioned this on his few social media accounts, I found through a Facebook post by another student that Mike had taken some special effects classes in his junior and senior years of college. I went to bed, thinking about what that implied, and that it all could just be an elaborate underground art project. Perhaps Mike had damaged a few cameras, then placed them in abandoned malls to gain attention or become the star of some urban legend. He and Jenna might have intentionally gone missing to make it all seem genuine. Despite those doubts, I rewatched the files numerous times over the next few days, searching for any clues that indicated everything was fake, however elaborate. But I wasn't good at spotting the tricks he might have used or finding imperfections in computer-generated elements. I had lunch with the friend who gave me the camera a week later and told him everything. We laughed, and he pulled me out of my depressed state after watching those videos by saying he was almost certain it was all fake because it sounded too much like Hollywood horror to be real. In a few years, Mike and perhaps Jenna would surely emerge as modern art creators, and anyone who had a copy of their video would have something small but valuable. But even after saying that, as we left the restaurant, he mentioned 2 final details. The camera, it turned out, was found embedded inside one of the mall's floor tiles. And one more thing. Early in the demolition process, his crew found a metal bucket in a room in the food court with many inexplicable bite marks around its rim, as if someone with extremely strong teeth had tried to chew it. He was silent for a moment after revealing these findings, then smiled and added, "Maybe those 2 kids were just overacting." Perhaps, but I couldn't extinguish the part of me that believed everything I had seen was true and knew that deep down. What happened to Mike and Jen was truly a mystery. Still in the area, I drove to where Sleepy Pines once stood one last time, and on this visit, I had a chance to look closely at the mural, moving closer while my mind pondered what might have happened on that desolate land. I tried to recall what I had seen as a child when I first visited the mall and admired the intricate brushstrokes, searching for secret creatures in the dark forest. Initially, I thought everything was still there, just waiting to be demolished and discarded, but on closer inspection, I discovered that the delicate brushstrokes of the night forest abruptly stopped and did not appear in the last third of the painting on the left, where it had been left empty and unfinished in Mike and Jenna's videos. The paint was still there, as were the trees and the somber tones of the eerie forest. But the delicate texture that only human hands could create had been replaced by something mechanical. What had been altered and then restored was now a soulless replica that could never achieve the authentic truth of a real historical artwork created by a real person who cherished every stroke.